Hello and welcome to the Supportcast. My name is Ed, and just yesterday I released a new stack to the RapidWeaver community called the cssDIV stack, and I released that for free. And after the release I was contacted by a friend who asked me if I could do a short cast, go over some detail on how to use this stack. So now that we are up and running, I thought I'd take a few minutes to go over my latest release. I like releasing free stacks to the community. It's a way to give back for everything that everybody's given me during my time over the past 2 or 3 years being a part of the forums. So let's jump right in. I've got a project file open here, and as you can see I've got a couple sections laid out in a stack, and the top one is a div ID stack and the lower one is a div class stack. And if we jump into the preview here, you can see I'm using the blocks box theme. Works really well, keeps everything clean looking, and I've styled these stacks up a bit differently. But I wanted to go over basically, when it comes to CSS, the difference between using the ID as opposed to the class, or using the class as opposed to the div ID. Now, a div ID is typically something that only is going to appear on the page once. So when we're talking about RapidWeaver themes, that would be something like your page header or your sidebar. It would only appear once on that page, so it would typically be identified by a div ID as opposed to a div class. And a div class is a form in CSS that is used repeatedly across a page and can be used multiple times on that page. So I wanted to be able to give us the ability to choose which div we wanted to use depending on the type of theme, because now that you can use stacks and things like blocks box, you can create div IDs, and we were a bit limited in that area. So I really dug into this and created this stack. Now if we jump back over to our edit view, we're going to see here that when you use a div ID, the selector, which is the name of the div, is going to be preceded with a hashtag. Now that's just the number symbol in your coding. When you're working with the CSS, you have to place a hashtag before it to identify that's the area that you're attempting to code. So if we jump into this stack right here and we pull the HUD up, you can see here that I chose the div ID type and I classified that as ID, and then I gave it a div name and I called it FreeCast so that I could style it up. And then if we take a look at our page inspector, because I'm not a huge fan of the single line style block that shows up in the HUD, I like to have some room so I can see my coding, and I choose to use the page inspector to do all that. You can see right here in the top half I have the div ID CSS, and you can see that is preceded by the hashtag, and then I've included some padding to impact the entire div on all 4 sides, gave the font a color of red, the font size 16 pixels with a border 2 pixel solid black. And if we go back to our preview, you can see where that padding is. Here's my font color is red, 16 pixels is the size, and there's our border, which is a 2 pixel solid black border. Now if we jump back over into our edit mode, you can see in the lower block I have chosen to use a div class. And if we bring the HUD up, we can see that the difference here is just that in the div type I've put class, and I kept the div name the same, FreeCast, so that we could see the difference here without using different information back and forth. Now a div class in CSS coding is preceded by a period. And if we bring up our page inspector, you can see right down here I have my div class coding, or CSS, so that I can style that up. And you'll notice that it's preceded by a period right here. If we look right here at the selector, it's preceded by a dot or a period, and then I've actually changed the way it's styled, but we could always go in and I could always change this, and I could do it more quickly if I just grab this, delete this out. We'll grab this here and we'll copy it and paste it in here, and then both of these divs will look the same when we preview them. They both have different selectors because one's a div ID preceded by the hashtag and one's a div class preceded by the period, but they both have the same look, just that with the div class, which is the lower one here, the bottom block, we can use this repeatedly on a page as it's meant to be used in coding. And with our div ID, we would only want to use that one time on a page. But that's how simple it is to use this stack that I've made. Let me get that out of the way. I didn't want the text one. I wanted to bring up the panel, or the HUD, for the actual CSS div. I wanted to give everybody the ability to choose what type of div they were using. And with the fire that Stacks has put into folks to be designing, and for those folks who like to use things like Bloxbox, this will be a very, very handy stack for you to be able to use because it gives you that choice. I do want to go over some other options that we have available, and if you'd like to see those options, you should jump on over to Supportcast, check out the different levels of membership that we have for our members, and pick one of those membership levels and jump in there and see what we have to offer. We do a lot of education on CSS and on the various stacks and plugins that are available to the RapidWeaver community. So check us out, see what we have to offer. I hope you enjoy this free stack that I released, and as always, code responsibly, and thank you for joining me.